we're on picture 5 of taming the ox. It's a very important phase. Taking the ox, putting the rope in his nose ring and bringing him along. Obviously, he has to be willing to come. Couldn't really pull him if he didn't want to come. So in this stage, we still struggle to hold on to him. This stage is a continuation of the 4th stage, where the struggle was mighty and the ox was not really easily tamed. He was just beginning to mind. But in the 5th stage, the ox becomes more manageable. So it's very interesting how the ox sometimes represents our ego and sometimes represents enlightened or awakened mind. This taming part is really about taming our own minds, taming the ego, turning it more and more so that our minds are led by our own Buddha nature, not by some idea we've got. We're really tuning in now to our deepest source. So this is a very important stage. And of course, I laugh because I think we call it a stage as if, once you get through this stage, you're in that stage and that one's gone. It doesn't really work like that. You're always in all the stages. So you can wake up one morning and be totally wrapped up in a story about how your life should go and how it is going, and have all kinds of feelings about that. And the ox has gone, just completely disappeared. And then suddenly, you'll see the ox quite clearly. Oh, this is one of my stories. I'm just caught up in it. Really helps to have a sense of humor. I was caught up in a story. I can't even remember what the story was, but what I remember, this is recently, what I remember was, I thought it was funny. Like I was really upset about something, which wasn't very important. And I kept looking at that upsetness and thinking, this is the silliest thing to be upset about. I can't believe I'm really upset about it. So that's the ox, the other part of the ox, the Buddha nature part of the ox, our awakened mind. So you are taming your mind now through continuous practice. You can't put down the whip, even for a moment, but you don't have to use it so often. The ox will more and more follow you. Now the you is the Buddha nature, your Buddha nature, your awakened mind. You're not so easily caught up by your stories. In fact, you begin to notice the moment of being caught by the story. A little anger here, a little impatience there. I took my car my car has 100,000 miles on it. So I take it in for its routine maintenance, and I come back with, they keep it for 2 days, and they give me a $2,000 bill. So that puts me in kind of a, not necessarily a positive mood. I took my car home and I looked at it, and it hadn't been washed or vacuumed. It was filthy. And that's part of the $2,000 I just paid them. I know that. So I thought, I'm going to call them up and yell at them. So I did that. They were very apologetic, so I couldn't really get wrapped up in it, but he did give me a free oil job next time I bring the car in. I thought that was a fair arrangement. You begin to experience now a growing equanimity in your life. Upsets are fewer. And you can remain unruffled by them. That's the really good part. So it's like you've got a distance from these stories. I wasn't really wrapped up in the fact that they hadn't vacuumed or washed the car. A reason why they hadn't washed the car, because the bumper was falling off. And if they run it through the washing machine, it would have destroyed the bumper possibly, and then et cetera, et cetera. So this stage can be quite lengthy. You can be in this stage maybe for a long time. Or maybe it never ends, actually. You just continue to mature in your practice. But nonetheless, the rewards of practice are clearly seen now. So let me read you the verses that go with this phase. Once one little thought arises, another follows. Adhere to awakening, and all becomes truth. Reside in ignorance, and all is unreal. This happens not because of the world, but only because of your mind. Keep a firm grip on that rope and do not waver. The next verse. Not for a moment put down whip or rein, lest the ox wander back to dust and desire. Pull it again and again, till it's tame and gentle. Of itself, it will follow without bridle or chain. Days pass, even the wild ox comes to hand and becomes a shadow to my body. How gratifying. So these verses describe the slow but inexorable turn towards our Buddha nature. As we tame our minds, our Buddha nature takes the lead. We're just tuned into it. The process takes less effort and less willpower. It's more a question of remembering ourselves. And our sense of humor begins to play a larger role in practice. Something that might have made us angry in the past now kind of amuses us. The anger might arise, but there's something amusing about the fact that our anger has arisen. We see the ego in action. We see the foibles of both ourselves and of others, and we hold it all with a light compassion. We see ourselves as flawed human beings, which allows us to connect to other flawed human beings in a very real way. Sometimes we find ourselves drifting away from practice, going on vacation, doing something fun. Our minds become clouded again, and like coming back to our breath when we meditate, we bring ourselves back to practice. Practicing mindfulness, we examine ourselves with ruthless honesty. We analyze our motivations to determine whether we are breaking a precept or not. We become a little stricter with ourselves in maintaining the precepts, not accepting excuses. However, we also accept ourselves as flawed, as fragile, doing our best, but we do not always succeed. Sometimes we just break a precept and we know we're breaking a precept. We haven't fully got it together yet. Having compassion for ourselves, we develop compassion for others, and our mindfulness practice becomes deeper. Sitting daily becomes easier. It's an experience of coming home to ourselves. Will is not so much needed now. It's a pleasure to sit. It's just what we do. It's who we are. Practicing mindfulness becomes a habit. Mindfulness of body and mindfulness of mind are a lens through which we see the world. We are forthright about loss, about death. We recognize them as inevitable, and we live with them in our sight. We do not hide from them. We do not hide them from ourselves. We live our life knowing that all is impermanent. And old age and death may already be here or just ahead. Oddly, facing old age and death makes them easier to bear. Speaking for myself, I know that losing my parents seemed inevitable and natural, even though I still feel their loss today. My father died 15 years ago of leukemia. He was diagnosed in December and died in the middle of February. It was really quite fast, but merciful. Fast is not so bad. We didn't have much time to prepare. My mother, on the other hand, died in 2008, 7 years ago. And her last year was a steady decline, with one crisis after another. And we were very prepared. It was kind of an agonizing year, watching her decline. My practice was a great help in dealing with both deaths. I did what had to be done without any drama. I simply stayed present to whatever was happening, including a lot of family dynamics. And now I find myself constantly preparing for my 81-year-old husband's death. He's pretty healthy, but he is 81 and stuff is going. It's changed my priorities so that I find myself choosing to spend time with him rather than do other things. We both quite consciously choose to squeeze fun things in now rather than later. Last night we did this marathon opera. Started at 8 and ended at midnight. Let me tell you, my bedtime is 10 o'clock. We went out to dinner and had a double espresso. More or less, carried, I had a nap too, he didn't have a nap. Carried us through the opera. It was fun. Looking at impermanence directly is an example of what the verse means. Adhere to awakening and all becomes truth. Reside in ignorance and all is unreal. So not seeing this oncoming train called death is willful ignorance. We're very afraid of death in our society, in our culture. It's very unknown. It's very mysterious. And I guess it's scary. Viewing life from both the absolute, the perspective of one body, and the relative, our dualistic everyday point of view, also becomes habit. We begin to hold them both simultaneously. We were in Morocco a couple of weeks ago and we were very enlivened by the differences between Morocco's Muslim culture and our own familiar Judeo-Christian culture. So many people asked me, weren't we afraid to go to a Muslim country? Well, Morocco is pretty stable. I wouldn't be wandering into Syria, but there haven't been any incidents in Morocco for a long time. So we had a lot of adventures. It was really, really, really interesting. And we learned a lot, and we found the people to be warm and friendly and very interesting. I felt connected to them. So this was a way of holding both the relative and the absolute at the same time. That feeling of interconnection, my sense of being connected to them, even though they were practicing a completely different religion, one I knew very little about. And they had so many different cultural values and cultural traditions. But the part of me that sits connected to the part of them that prayed 5 times a day. I was fascinated by their religion and tried to learn as much as I could while I was there. So it's very useful to begin to notice how fear and anxiety tend to permeate our culture. But in this phase, taming the ox, they begin to recede. The line in the Heart Sutra, no hindrance, therefore no fear, is true. In experiencing the oneness, the one body, there is nothing to fear because there's no separation. Each moment just arises and is precious just as it is.